또 뭐 robbery, 누가 차를 유리창을 깨고 뭘 훔쳐갔다, 누가 날 뒤에서 쫓아왔다, 여러 가지로 이제 범죄 이런 일들이 많은데, 우리 정부나 우리 LA하인회나 또 한인 단체들을 포함해서 팬데믹 시작하고 나서 계속 얘기했던 게, 보시면 신고를 하세요. 911 부르세요. 근데 가끔 가다가 실제적인 거는 911을 부르면은 저희가 이제 언어 문제 때문에 아니면 여러 가지 문제 때문에 진행들이 계속 안 되는 그런 상황들이 되게 자주 벌어지고 있어요. 그래서 오늘 저희가 특별히 LA 카운티 이제 이 범죄들을 잡는 경찰, 그 다음에 이분들을 기소하는 카운티 검사, 또 시 검사, 또 LAPD를 다 한 방에 모이셔가지고 도대체 어떻게 되는 건지, 우리가 세금 내는 주민으로서 어떻게 보호를 받는지, 그 다음에 그 보호 절차가 어떻게 진행이 되는지에 대해서 좀 자세히 알아보려고 오늘 이런 간담회를 열었습니다.
오늘 이렇게 와줘서 참 감사합니다. 안녕하세요. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Chang, and I'm a prosecutor with the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office. Before I start this part of the presentation, I have to be the attorney that I am and make a disclaimer. Everything that I discuss in this presentation is my own personal opinion and does not reflect that of the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office. So Los Angeles County, as you see on this map, is very big. Up top, you have all the way to Antelope Valley, and then going all the way down to Catalina Island. And so there are approximately 10 million residents within LA County. And throughout LA County, there are numerous courthouses that are throughout the county itself. And in each of the courthouses, there generally is a district attorney's office assigned to that courthouse. It is the largest local prosecutorial agency in the nation, and there are approximately 750 attorneys or so. Just to give you a brief, quick overview, there are misdemeanors and then there are felonies. The difference is that misdemeanors, such as driving without or driving under the influence of alcohol or other types of crimes, there's a ceiling, a maximum of 1 year in county jail. With felonies, a person can be sentenced to state prison for the rest of their life, depending on what the crime is, such as murder, rape, or other crimes. Now, my current assignment, I am in the Community Violence Reduction Division. I prosecute gang homicides. And before doing so, I had also had prior assignments in the Hardcore Gang Division, downtown Central Trials 11, also in Central Preliminary Hearings in East Lake Juvenile. And what's important is that I was downtown for approximately 8 years. And so when I was assigned as a trial attorney, I did see Korean victims. I did interact with victims of all backgrounds. And just to see a Korean-speaking individual see me and that the way that they would react, because nobody likes going to court, I know that we need more people in our district attorney's office and police officers because Koreatown is very important to us all. If there's 3 takeaways that I want you to walk away from, and the first is please report. I know it's not easy to be a victim of a crime, but we can't help you unless we know about what happened. We don't know what happened until you report that crime either by calling 911 or someone else. Have a plan. Organizations like KAFLA are so important because we understand it is intimidating to go to someone and report a crime and you're not as comfortable with English. But there are organizations and there are interpreters. If not, you can have a son or daughter or neighbor or someone that you know who speaks English be that person. So with my mom, whose English is not that great, I have a letter that she carries with her. And when she gets in a car accident or something happens, she's to give that letter to whatever officer or someone that comes. We have a plan in place, and you should have that plan too. Nobody plans to be a victim, but should something happen, you should have a plan in place. You should also take safety precautions. Nobody plans to be a victim, but even now, when I go to the market, I'll see people with their shopping carts, and they'll have their purse and then their wallet there. And then they'll leave their purse and cart, and they'll walk to get something away from their purse. These are small things, I understand, but you want to limit your exposure and take precautions. I see people walking in busy areas looking at their cell phone. You got to be careful of getting hit by a car, but you may also fall and trip. So when you are out, please be aware of your surroundings. So when we talk about reporting, there are different kinds of reporting. From a prosecutor's perspective, law enforcement reporting is a priority. We all know 911, call 911. The problem is sometimes people don't speak English, and they call and they don't know how to report it, so that might prevent a person from calling. If you can't call, then have someone else that you know and trust be your interpreter, or hopefully there will be witnesses that call too. You can also report non-serious or non-urgent crimes online through the LAPD website, and I'm focusing more so with LAPD because Koreatown falls within their jurisdiction. For non-emergency, when there's no injuries, no known suspects, you can go online and you can file it on their website. You can also, some people don't like to step forward and reveal their identity. And I will tell you, even working my gang cases right now, we solve a lot of cases or get important tips through Crime Stoppers. Go to this website. If you see a crime, but you're afraid, still report the crime. We need to know, and it helps us. You can do it anonymously. Lastly, you can go to the Olympic police station and walk in. But when you walk in, have a support person. Have someone who speaks English. This station, fortunately, has a number of Korean American officers who do speak Korean or other languages. So this is beneficial to you, but just in case, it's always helpful to have someone with you. Non-law enforcement reporting. There are agencies that are keeping track and they want to help you. They understand the language barrier. Even now, when my mom gets a letter in English, she's scared, she's nervous. She thinks that something bad's going to happen, so she calls me and asks me, hey, can you take a look at this letter? There are groups like KAFLA, like this, where you can come and they will help you. And there are other organizations that are keeping track of Asian hate incidents if it's Asian hate related. How does prosecution work? So I want to give a crime example. We know that oftentimes 1 minute, within that minute, it can change a person's life. This is an area, Western and Olympic, many of us are familiar just driving in this area. I want to suppose that someone is walking down this intersection or street, and while they're walking, a woman has her purse. And while she's walking with her purse, a person approaches, punches her, and then takes her purse, and there's a struggle or fight over the purse, and then the person yells, "I hate Koreans, go back to your country." In terms of injuries, let's suppose that there is a black eye because the person got hit in the face. There's a broken arm because when there was a struggle, the lady fell and then the person took off with the purse. That the purse was taken, so that there's a theft or robbery. And then there's, of course, the trauma that the person feels. Anecdotally, I've heard stories of individuals who've been assaulted in Koreatown. And I hear of a woman who got punched in the face and her property was taken. And she's so afraid to leave her apartment now. And she's depressed. And she didn't report it. And I understand why a person doesn't want to report. I understand why it's scary. But we can't help you unless we know about it. We understand that there's intimidation with the system because it's not something you're familiar with. You may not speak English. There are emotional and psychological issues. And sometimes I've even seen people be embarrassed about what happened. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. Nobody plans to be a victim. And so there should be no sense of shame. I think one of the saddest things that I see is when victims blame themselves. They say, I shouldn't have gone out that day. I should have listened to my husband or my wife. I shouldn't have gone to that market. They told me not to go to that market and I went anyways. And that for me is the hardest thing to see because I want to let you know it is not your fault when you're a victim to a crime. That is someone else's action and conduct that caused that. You should never blame yourself. You should never feel embarrassed or ashamed about what happened. Please step forward and speak up. 1 minute is all it takes for a person's life to change. And so the reason why we want you to step forward is that you may be able to not only have justice in your case, but also prevent someone else from being another victim as well. So let's suppose that someone calls 911. What happens? Well, typically officers respond. And then when they respond, they ask what happened. And so one way to say it, when they ask what happened, one statement might be, hey, a man took my purse and now my arm hurts. That's true, but is that very accurate? When you call 911 or interact with officers, have an idea of what you're going to say. And I would suggest starting with the person first. A man hit my face, hurt my arm, and then took my purse. Start with the person first, then go to the property. Because oftentimes officers, they're trying to interview and figure out what happened. And so they're trained to take accurate reports. But sometimes if that key part gets left out, it changes the whole dynamic of the case. What's written in report is what prosecutors read and go by. Start with a person, injury to person, property, and if there's any hate crime statements, make sure that that gets mentioned as well. That is something often forgotten, or it may be mentioned casually, or sometimes people don't even understand it. But if there's anything like "go back to your country" or "I hate you Koreans," something of that nature, make sure it's in the report. With regards to police officers, when they respond, they author an incident report. That report is then assigned to a detective. And someone, for example, at the robbery table, at the robbery detectives table, they'll review the police reports. And that detective has a very important role. And what they're going to do is investigate the case. So what happens is when you interact with police officers and they take down an incident report, you need to keep track of that incident report. Keep that number. Keep it close by. Write it down. You can't just say I was a victim of a robbery. You have to say, hey, there's a police report associated with my crime. Keep that incident report number, and every time you interact with the LAPD, you can always have that ready to at hand. The other thing is each one of us, officers and DAs, we have a serial number, we have an ID. Whenever you interact with an officer, for example, let's say it's Officer Chang, that's not enough. There's a lot of Officer Changs. You're going to need their serial number. And every officer has their badge ID number, so keep track of that. And this is so that things don't get fallen through or don't fall through, and you can keep track with who you spoke to, when you spoke to them, and what incident number. So let's say that a detective investigates the case. They follow up with victims and witnesses and interviews, and they get a better idea of who did this crime. And they know who did it and how it happened. Sometimes they'll visit the crime scene. They'll review officers' body cams, because a lot of LAPD officers, they have body cameras that record interactions. And sometimes they'll visit nearby areas, and they'll get video recordings, and they'll see what happened. But assuming that there's enough evidence and their follow-up, they'll write another report. And this detective writes the entire investigation of what happened. They have a list of possible offenses. The detective will say, hey, based on this report, there is a robbery. Once a detective is assigned, they present that case and they walk it over to the district attorney's office or the city attorney's office. So there's a police report, a detective's report, detective walks that case over, and then the DA reviews the case. So you can see here, at the top there's the detective, and there's a crossroads. One, it's an open investigation. And unfortunately, a lot of our cases, they do fall here in this, whoa. I didn't realize it's a touchscreen. A lot of cases are in that open investigation. Sometimes cases are not solved. I think not that long ago in Koreatown, there was Denny Kim, who was an Air Force veteran. He was assaulted. There was race hate incidents or language when he was being beaten up, and the suspects fled. And I don't know to this date, from my understanding, that's not a case that's been filed, and the reason being is there's not enough evidence. I'm not a part of that investigation, but I'm assuming that is a possible scenario. And unfortunately, unless we have witnesses or evidence, it's difficult for us to file those cases. But let's assume the case is presented, and then the DA says there's enough evidence here. This guy did it beyond a reasonable doubt. They'll file that case. If not, the DA's office will reject it and say this case needs to be worked up. There needs to be more investigation done. With every investigation, detectives will need possible leads. They may not have enough to present for a filing. And so sometimes some of you may say, I filed a crime or I filed a report, but nothing happened. Why? And the why is because the detectives are working up the case and there may not be enough evidence. District attorney reviews the reports. They determine whether we can prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. And they file the charges according to what the facts say. We have an ethical obligation to the community, to the law, to the defendant. When we file a case against an individual, that can have lasting impacts even for the defendant, and we have to make sure that we're doing the right thing. Oftentimes we have incidents where there's no other witnesses. It's one person complaining against another person, a he said, she said. That is very difficult to prove. And we have to follow ethical standards to make sure that before we file a case, that there is enough evidence. We're looking for corroboration. As a prosecutor, this is what we live and die for. Not only that the person did it, but there's witnesses or evidence to help corroborate that the crime happened. Again, we have an ethical obligation to make sure that we do the right thing. So once the case gets filed by the DA's office in downtown, there's a BA number, right? And in this example, it's BA 11111. When you get a case number, write that case number down. That's how you can keep track of the case. Whenever you call the DA's office, they're not going to know what case you're talking about unless you give them the case number. So LAPD has their own incident number. The DA's office and the court system has a BA number for downtown cases. And there will be a DA assigned to the case, and make sure you get that person's information. Sometimes cases, they settle or go to trial. And a settlement means that they agree to plead guilty and they receive a sentence. Sometimes they want to go to trial. And when we go to trial, the DA will put on evidence. Jurors will decide whether the defendant is guilty or not beyond a reasonable doubt. Time-wise, trials can happen months, but more oftentimes it takes years. And the one thing you have to understand is the defendants, they have to waive time. The prosecutors are deemed ready. Meaning if the defense attorney says, I need more time, this is such a serious case, I need more time to prepare for trial, then they'll put that case over until they're ready. And then when they're ready, we'll go to trial. And COVID has really affected things because there are so many cases. Once 12 jurors listen to the evidence, they determine guilt. If guilty, the judge determines punishment. So the jurors decide whether the person's guilty. The judge determines what the fair punishment would be. We also have victim advocates. This is important because sometimes our victims have hospital bills. You are not responsible for those bills if you are a victim of the crime, and there are advocates who can help you. So that's another reason why you want to report these cases, so that you can have the resources that are available to assist you. They can also help with counseling. At the sentencing date, victims are given an opportunity to speak about what happened and how the crime has affected them. And then in certain cases, there are protective orders. So the person's ordered, hey, you can't come to this business. You have to be 100 yards away from this person. Victims also have rights under Marcy's Law. And it's in the California Constitution. And it's a Bill of Rights for victims. And without putting the whole language, it's essentially saying that victims have the right to be informed, to be notified, and to be heard, right? If you're a victim to a crime and then all of a sudden you call and say, hey, what happened to my case? Oh, the case pled, or the guy's out. That's not fair to the victim. And so there are rights. And there are actually pro bono attorneys who work as Marcy's Law's attorneys. So if you don't feel comfortable navigating, there are attorneys who can help you with this. I'm done now. My final thoughts, Again, please report. I know it's scary, I know it's intimidating, but there are so many people that I work with that want to help you. And our job is to serve the community, to help you. So please report crimes, no matter how embarrassing, no matter how scary it might be. There are good people who would do everything in the world to help you. And then number two, I see students here. You are so important to our community. What I would recommend is to the students, intern, volunteer. Our office makes it very easy to intern. Apply. We are very transparent, and this may be the career for you. There are so many people who need your help, and I would highly urge you, just intern with our office, give us a chance, just to see if this is the job for you. Thank you, everyone.
안녕하세요. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you to James and the coalition and all the other community partners for today's event. My name is Irene Lee, and I'm the Vice President of the Korean Prosecutors Association. Just to tell you a little bit of our organization, we were formed in 2010. And back then, several prosecutors of Korean descent got together wanting to further serve this community. And just to tell you a little bit about myself, I grew up in Koreatown during the time of the riots. I remember it very well. And I believe that that planted the seed for me to want to become a prosecutor. And as John stated, all the prosecutors that are in this room can wholeheartedly say that we are here because we want to serve the community. And when a prosecutor goes in the courtroom, they always state their name and they say for the people. So, John Chang for the people, and when I was a DA, I would say Irene Lee for the people, and it's not something to take lightly. We are here to serve you all. And so I'm just glad that we can have this first event, and I hope that it's the beginning of many events where we can answer the questions and be there for you, and we want to be transparent about the process. And we know that there are many barriers that impact our community, including language barriers and access to information. And I'm just hoping that today's event will help shed away any of the concerns that you have. And I'll stop here and hand it off to Robert Cha from the City Attorney's Office. Thank you.
안녕하세요. My name is Robert Cha. A little bit about me. I've been with the LA City Attorney's Office for 27 years now, and I've held a number of assignments. I grew up in Koreatown as well, and my family has been in business here my whole life. So up until I now currently supervise our mental health courts. So whenever we have a criminal offender who's mentally incompetent to stand trial, they send them to our court, and we develop a plan to address their mental health needs. Prior to that, though, I was in charge of our vertical prosecution division, which handle all of our vertical hate crimes prosecution. So this is an area that is very near and dear to my heart. All right. Oh, they changed the slide. So this, I'll give the same disclaimer that this presentation is not necessarily the opinions of the LA City Attorney's Office, but of mine. This PowerPoint presentation actually was presented by Dan Lee. Most of you know Daniel, who was formerly the Olympic Division neighborhood prosecutor. This presentation, I give him all the credit. If there's anything inaccurate or questionable, you can contact Dan Lee, and his contact will be at the end of this slide. All right, so how does prosecution work? A couple of things. A lot of this will be redundant, so I'll go through them quick from what John presented. Reporting, law enforcement referral, filing decisions, arraignment, pretrial, trial, and what happens after trial. All right, so reporting a crime, obviously call 911 if it's an emergency. There's a non-emergency line, 877, Ask LAPD. An alternative is you can go to the station, but as John mentioned, it would probably speed things along if you brought an English-speaking interpreter. You can also file a police report online. I'm not as familiar with that, but I'm sure Captain Ponce can give a little more information on that process. And please seek out a support person, assistance from friends, family, or community organizations such as this. All right, so what happens after you file the report? Number one, please be available to answer any follow-up questions. In most cases, the case will be assigned a detective, and the detective, maybe the next day, a few days later, will call you and ask for some follow-up information. In addition to collecting additional evidence, corroboration, videos, anything that might assist the prosecution of the crime. If you haven't heard from LAPD, you can always contact them and ask if an investigating officer or detective has been assigned to the case and ask for a status update. But as John mentioned, the volume of crime is tremendous in the city of Los Angeles, so it does take a bit of time. Rarely is a case filed within 48 hours. Or you can contact the city attorney's office to find out if a filing decision was made, as well as the DA's office. And I'll provide you with contact information at the end of this. All right, so some things to remember. It's really, really important to report the crimes and complaints to law enforcement. You can't really overstate this because it's my opinion that hate crimes are incredibly underreported. There's a lot of reasons that may be the case. I'm sure Eunice could speak on that. But one thing, and I don't believe LAPD is ever going to ask for immigration status. So that should never come up in trial as well. There's a law that requires these issues to be handled ahead of time, but that should never be a factor in reporting crime. Hopefully, one of the purposes of this presentation is to kind of demystify the criminal process. It's very scary to even call 911. I've done it once in my life. And to be interviewed, especially when you're still in the throes of what just happened to you. It's very scary. But all along the way, from your first contact with LAPD, through the filing of a case, assignment of a victim advocate, at a number of intercept points, actually, we are going to have resources and support people for you, including Korean-speaking advocates or hearing officers. So let me go through this, and I'll go through the court process. You can request anonymity, but frankly, on a misdemeanor. Oh, let me back up. So John had mentioned a basic difference between the district attorneys and the city attorneys. To this day, after 27 years, my parents still think I'm a DA. So very different offices. The DAs handle felonies and misdemeanors in the entire county of Los Angeles, except for some incorporated cities, such as the city of LA, that have their own city prosecutor. The city attorney's office, my office, we have a huge division that only does civil work. We sue corporations, we defend the city when they sue city employees such as LAPD officers or firefighters, civil lawsuits. We also have a public rights division. That's all on the civil side. My side, the criminal prosecution side, we file and prosecute misdemeanors that occur within the city of Los Angeles. So hopefully if you're a victim of a crime, it'll be a misdemeanor and it'll come to our office. All right, so be patient. The city is very large, and there's often a number of agencies that could be involved in these investigations, so we just ask for your patience. Okay, so timeline, what happened? So number one, let me take a step back. It is really, really important to file a case. I won't get into the nuances or difference between hate crimes, the elements of it, and hate incidents, but bottom line, this information is very, very important to us. Even if it's a hate incident, well, all right, generally speaking, a hate crime is, there's some underlying crime that is motivated by some bias or racist reason, right? So a battery, a vandalism, a criminal threat to kill someone. Those are all independent crimes, and we could file those crimes. But if they are committing those crimes, hitting someone, burning someone's property, threatening to kill someone because they were substantially motivated by this racist or bias, then that becomes a hate crime. If we can't meet that element, for example, someone comes up to you, punches you in the face, you think they targeted you because you're Asian, but we just have insufficient evidence of that. Our office very aggressively still files that underlying crime, that battery, that vandal destruction of property. So there are many ways this case can be filed and that defendant or individual held accountable. In addition to filing, we have a very robust pre-filing diversion program. We have city attorney hearings, we have arbitration. So There are other ways to bring in that offender, admonish him or her. They are in our database. Any subsequent, we have a policy, any subsequent contact, we're not going to file another diversion or give him another diversion or city attorney hearing option. But now we have a record. Similarly, if a person has committed, you're not sure if it's a hate crime or a hate incident, they said something incredibly offensive, racist, they were in your face, still make that report, because in the future, that prior incident is really helpful for the prosecution of the case. I'll give you an example. We had a case where this individual was following this woman, was yelling at her, harassing her, kicked her dog, and punched her. Okay. On its face, he didn't utter any racist comment. She thought it was, okay, but it turned out on a prior incident when we ran him, there was a report, a hate incident report, where he was following this other woman, African American, was yelling racist, N-word this, N-word that, horrible incident. That case wasn't filed because there was no underlying crime, but it was incredibly useful to show that on the second date, his intent, these are what's called specific intent. So we have to show that not only did he hit her, but he did it with that racist, biased intent that substantially motivated that crime. So we filed that and got a conviction. So even hate incidents are very, very important to document and to report. It may not ultimately result in a case being filed and you going to court. Maybe that's a good thing, but we may resolve it through a city attorney hearing or other admonishment. And at these hearings, we can tell them, look, we're not filing this case this time, but you are ordered to go to the Museum of Tolerance, to go to anti-bias education programs. We have a lot of tools at the city attorney's office that can intervene and educate this individual. So really quickly, John went over this, but there are essentially 5 main stages: filing, arraignment, pretrial, trial, and post-conviction. After LAPD investigates the case, they submit it to, they submit it to the DA's office. We have an inter-office, interagency agreement that all hate crimes, and they're relatively unique to hate crimes, the district attorney, even if it looks like it's a misdemeanor, is going to review that case first. The supervisor of the hate crime unit, I meet with him monthly, and he wants to see all those hate crimes, which is good. If it's not filed as a felony, they can either reject it, or most of the time they will refer to us to see if we will file misdemeanor charges. Typically, if someone is hurling racial comments and pushes you or slaps you or punches you, unless there's really serious injuries, those are probably going to be handled at the misdemeanor level. And then we will review it. Again, we are very aggressive in filing our cases. Our average filing rate is probably close to 20-30%. With hate crime related offenses, it's closer to 50%. If we don't file the hate crime, again, we have the option of filing the underlying crime: battery, vandalism, criminal threats. If we don't file it, as I mentioned, we have a number of pre-filing diversion programs or city attorney hearings where we do bring them in, admonish them, and often order certain obligations, including restitution or community service. At the reporting stage, we have representatives with what's called our Victim Assistance Program. They're often co-located at the stations, but they can be reached, and they can provide restitution for medical bills and other services. Once we do file, we have additional services that we can offer, as well as court accompaniment. Okay. If we do file a case, they're arraigned. That's the first time the defendant is brought to court, unless their attorney appears on their behalf. And most of the time they're there, and then we can order that. That's the first time they're told of the formal charges. They can plead to the charge then, or they can ask for their trial. There's an intermediate stage, a pretrial stage. That's the first time our office is going to subpoena you and bring you into court. Most of the time, a victim advocate will contact you, and they can arrange, they can pay for an Uber, a taxi cab, to bring you to court, meet you outside the courthouse, sit with you during the proceedings so you don't have to be alone. You could even be sitting on a different floor. So again, we're very sensitive to your security and comfort, and not being re-traumatized by going through this foreign process. The trial, if it gets to that stage, the vast majority of our cases resolve before trial. So just because the case is filed doesn't mean you're going to have to testify in front of a jury. When you show up at the pre-trial, you're not going to testify. You're just there usually to give a statement. You're there for an hour. We'll get you in and out. But if it gets to the trial stage, the individual wants their trial, as John highlighted. You pick a jury, you get on the stand, you give your statement. The defense attorney will have an opportunity to ask you questions. And usually that's it. Usually your involvement is 1 day, maybe 2. Our misdemeanor trials take about 5 days, and then the jury returns the verdict. If he or she is convicted, then they're sentenced, and he or she will be ordered to engage in certain probationary conditions, including, we have a great program, a partnership with the Museum of Tolerance, where they will have to sit down and with a member of the Korean American community, if the victim is Korean American, and have to listen. This is how your crime and what you uttered affects not only me, but my community. And this is how, and that's hard to do. If the crime is against LGBT, against African American, against a Jewish person, they will sit with a Holocaust survivor or someone from that targeted community. So it's very powerful. So we have a lot of tools to educate these individuals, in addition to conventional punishment. So, all right, let me run through. This is an example of a typical arrest report. Defendant's biographical information, your information, and the police officer's information. I already talked about arraignment, pre-trial, trial, post-conviction. And that's it. This is Daniel Lee's information. Feel free to call him and give him your comments on this presentation. But also you can contact me. My name's Robert Cha, C-H-A. My email is robert.cha@lacity.org. Okay, and I think that's it. All right. Thank you.
카운티 검사, 시검사 두 분이 나오셔가지고 좀 디테일하게 이제 그 경찰 리포트 하고 난 다음에 절차가 어떻게 진행이 되는지 설명을 해주셨는데 사실은 이런 분들 우리가 언제 만나겠어요, 솔직히. 콜트나 가야지 만나지 소통하기도 힘들고 솔직히 말씀드리면 그러면 우리가 이제 뭐 이런 일들을 당하면은 제일 먼저 뭐 언론을 포함해서 우리 이제 시민들이 제일 먼저 손가락질하는 사람이 누구예요? 경찰이잖아요, 그죠? 저놈들이 나 당해가지고 나 뒤통수 맞아가지고 폴리스 리포트 했는데 연락도 안 되고 디텍티브 전화했는데 전화도 안 받고 폴리스 리포트 하고 싶어도 힘들고 911 불렀는데 2시간 넘게 안 오고 뭐 저놈은 벌써 도망갔는데 뭐 12시 뭐 후에 오고 지금 여기 뭐 오렌지 카운티, 샌디에고 뭐 LA 카운티 계신 분들 많으신데 아마 뭐 어디를 가던 그 experience는 똑같을 거예요, 그죠? 네, 그래서 오늘 이제 이벤트가 특별한 게 LA 카운티, 시검사, LAPD를 한 방에 모아놓고 서로 싸우라고 저희가 불러놨어요, 사실은. 농담이고요. 그래서 저희 그 4.29 폭동 이후에 올림픽 경찰서가 생겼잖아요. 한인타운을 지켜야 되는 다른 그 폴리스 스테이션이 특별히 있어야 된다고 그래가지고 Captain, how long you been in Olympic now?
About a year and a half.
오케이, 1년 반 동안 저희 올림픽 경찰서의 제일 높으신 캡틴 3, 캡틴 에런 펀세를 소개를 해드리고 좀 그 911을 부르고 우리 올림픽 경찰서를 조금 더 활용을 잘해서 주민들의 컴플레인을 좀 들어줄 수 있는지 그 다음에 오늘 또 우리 우리 한인타운을 컨트롤하는 분들 또 시니어 리더 오피서 분들 몇 분 오셨으니까 이분들이 좀 이렇게 설명을 할 수 있는 기회를 잠깐 드리겠습니다. Captain, come on up.
Well, good morning. How is everybody today? Excellent. So that's some great information. Thank you, John, Robert, Irene. I really appreciate that. And it's great to see a lot of young faces. And one of the questions I would ask right up front as we're talking about community safety, support, have a plan, is whose job is community safety? If we think about Koreatown, if we think about Olympic Division, which is on either side of the 10 freeway, so south of us, 10 freeway, north to the 101, roughly from Larchmont Village and then kind of zigzags on the west side down to Crenshaw to the 10 freeway and then Hoover. That's Olympic Division, 6.2 square miles. 190,000 people live here. And as you know, we don't have a lot of open space and parks. So whose job is community safety? Is it solely the police? Is it the DA and CA's office who's spoken? Is it KAFLA? Is it you? Or is it all of us? Young man, what do you say? All of us, right? We all have a part. And in particular, our community. We cannot do our job without you. We cannot do our job well without your partnership, without what I heard when John was talking about reporting a crime. I heard and I thought of the word courage. The courage to come forward, to call 911, the courage to interact when we might have a language barrier or a culture barrier, and the strength to do that. The courage of those that might have seen something that happened to your fellow mankind, your neighbor, to stay and talk to the police or to call later and say, hey, I saw what happened, let me help, right? So that takes courage. And without all of us working together, we, the police, cannot help facilitate keeping our communities safe. So I would say in many cases, we're a facilitator of community safety. Now, a couple little facts. How many people, quiz, how many people live in the city of Los Angeles? Any guesses? Throw out a number. Yes, sir. 3 million. Excellent. A little higher. 4. Thank you. We're right at about 4 million, give or take. Maybe 4.1, maybe 3.9, depending on what census you look at, right? I already said it. How many people live in Olympic division? 6.2 square miles, roughly.
190,000.
About 190,000, maybe a little more. How many officers does the Los Angeles Police Department have?
Not enough.
Any guesses? And we're talking police officers, detectives, administrators like myself. I'm more of an administrator. I'm not driving around. It doesn't mean I couldn't interact, but that's not really my function. 10,000. So when Richard Riordan was here, the goal was, and when I was hired in 1994, the goal was 10,000 officers by former Mayor Richard Riordan. And at one point, we got to 10,000. I think 10,025 or 10,036 officers when the old MTA police joined with Los Angeles Police Department. Right now, we're at 9,000 total employees, sworn employees. Those would be individuals that wear the uniform. We have about 3,000 or 2,700 civilian employees, professional employees. That's where your generation comes in. Because we need you to interface, whether you want to be a city attorney, a district attorney office, a police officer, a victim's advocate. We need you to consider serving your community and that idea of community safety as a career path. So we need you to consider that. And we have a job for you. So if we take those 9,000 officers and we divide it into 4,000 or 4 million, that's about 444 officers, or 444 citizens for every one LAPD employee. At Olympic, we have 245 sworn employees, detectives, myself, the other captain. Multiply that or divide that by 190,000, the number changes. That's about 775 residents per sworn police officer to serve this community. I go back to the fact that we need your help, and we need you to think about, we need the community's help, we need that courage, and we need you to consider as you leave high school, enter college, that this is a valuable career to give service back to the community and create community safety. So I wanted to touch on just a couple things that we've already touched on. You call 911, the officers come out and take a report. That report is processed in records. That report then gets to the detectives. Say it's the robbery we were talking about, the example of the woman who was punched, broke her arm, and her purse was taken. Her property was taken by force, so that becomes the crime of robbery. A lot of times, a robbery is confused with burglary, and we say somebody robbed my house. Burglary is when somebody breaks into your house when you're on vacation and takes your stuff. That's a burglary, entering a structure, breaking into a structure. Burglary and robbery. Robbery is taking your property by force or fear. So this woman was robbed in this example. The police come out and they take the report. It goes to the detective. A robbery is a felony. Our detectives are going to look at all the reports and decide if it's a Category 1 report or a Category 2 report. Category 1 has definite follow-up. We have to follow up with that. And we're looking for a suspect, and we're looking to present that either to the district attorney's office or the city attorney's office. Here is where we come back to you as the victim, witnesses, your statement, video evidence, and physical evidence to be able to put all of that together and present it to one of the prosecutor's offices in our city for a successful prosecution to bring that individual justice and hopefully bring you some peace of mind that the system, the process is working on your behalf. So that's why it's critically important. So a Category 1, we have to do a follow-up and write a follow-up report. You saw it on here, that we call that follow-up report, a 314. That has to be done in 30 days. On a Category 2 case, that is like I left my bike in the yard and my bicycle was gone in the morning. I asked all of my neighbors for their video off their house. They said they didn't see anybody take it. They looked at their video. I don't know who took it, but I know it's a blue bike and I know it's a 10-speed. How many blue 10 speeds do you think are in the city? Not a lot to follow up on. So we hope that our detectives will either write you a contact card to say, we got your report, and if you find anything else out, please contact us. But that report we're not going to investigate. There is nothing that we can do except we have it on file, so when our officers stop somebody on a blue bicycle and we remember, you know what, I was over at your house the other day and I had a blue 10-speed bicycle, and when I stopped John, he cannot explain how he got that bicycle or where it was. I wonder if that's your bicycle. So maybe I take a picture of John, I take a picture of that bicycle. I said, until you can prove that's your bicycle, I'm going to take it into evidence as police. So I show you the picture, you say, yep, that's my bicycle. Now I might not be able to arrest John for that, but now I can present that case, write it all up, present that case to the city attorney's office, because that's a misdemeanor, say, and they will consider filing that. They may or may not file it. So Category 1, Category 2, we've already talked about that case could go to the DA's office, it could go to the CA's office. A case that's a felony goes to the DA's office. They could do a couple things. Like, as they said, they could reject the case, they can file the case, they can give it back to us for more investigative. Good try, police. Go get some more evidence. Go interview that victim or witness again. We need a little bit more from you, and ask us for that. They can also give it, if it's a case that we call a wobbler, it is, depending on the severity, say, of the battery, somebody punches you, they could give it to the city attorney's office for consideration, which goes through that same step process. File it, give it back to the police, or reject it. Or maybe send that person to mediation or some other process within the criminal justice system. So, in closing, I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank especially our young audience for taking the time out. Our partners, because this is a partnership, right? We talk about, you've probably heard the term community-based policing. I'd like us to think about partnership policing. And the partnership is really what I would call the partnership between your police department, the Los Angeles Police Department, our community we serve, all of you, our partners in the rest of the criminal justice system, our partners in our business community, our partners like KAFLA and other organizations within our city that provide our support to create community safety. Through those partnerships, all of us working together, that is how we can help each other create a safer community for all of you, whether that be a school environment, whether that be Vermont and Wilshire, or whether that be Koreatown, when we talk of Koreatown, or all the vast communities of Olympic Division. So together, we work together for the safety of Olympic Division and a safer Los Angeles. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time. There you go.
Okay, thank you, Captain Ponce, for that brief but very informative information about the police side of things. Okay, so Captain.
Sir?
Oh, I was just saying Captain. I wasn't actually addressing that.
Yes, sir.
우리 캡틴 펀세가 사실 지금 방금 커뮤니티 폴리싱에 대해서 말씀하셨는데 사실 커뮤니티 폴리싱을 제일 잘하시는 것 같아요. 제가 캡틴 펀세의 셀폰 번호도 있고 우리 한인타운에서 무슨 문제가 생기면 저희가 항상 이제 그저께도 이제 베케이션을 가셨는데 전화를 받으시더라고요. 예, 그래가지고 제가 되게 고맙고 우리 한인 커뮤니티에서 우리 한인들이 좀 문제가 있으면 뭐 어디 당장 급하게 경찰이 필요하다 지금 그러면 꼭 보내주시고 한 번은 여러분 한인타운에서 하시는 분들 아시겠지만 웰시하고 유가에 시트벨트 티켓 주잖아요. 자전거 탄 사람들 그 사람들을 여기 올림픽까지 보냈어요. 여기 은행에 뱅크업에 문제가 있어가지고 그래서 항상 저는 캡틴한테 되게 고맙고 그 올림픽 경찰서에서 또 퍼트롤 하시는 분들 그 다음에 아까 제가 잠깐 말씀해드렸는데 Senior Lead Officer라는 게 있어요. How many Senior Leads are in the Olympic Division?
10.
Senior Lead Officer라는 분이 이 한인타운에만 10분이 계시는데 그 중에 저희가 몇 분을 오늘 모셔가지고 잠깐 자기 소개를 해드리고 만약에 여러분들이 여기 한인타운 시민으로서 문제가 있으면 사실 이분들한테 연락을 뭐 이제 emergency는 물론 911을 부르지만 커뮤니티 멤버들로서 이분들한테 충분히 연락을 할 수 있는 권리가 있으세요. 그래서 잠깐 if I could have all four of the officers come up really quick. I'd like to introduce you guys to the community. 혹시 해리 조 경관님이라고 아시는 분 손 들어주세요. Anybody heard of the name Harry Cho? Okay, yeah, some of the media does. The living legend. Harry Cho라는 분이 여기 Senior Lead Officer 중에 한 분인데 제가 오늘 오라고 했는데 왜 안 오셨는지 잘 모르겠지만 어쨌든 한인 그 Senior Lead Officer 분이 계시고 이 지금 한인회하고 요 코리아타운 플라자까지 지역은 사실 이 루시 버미레스라고 Senior Lead Officer가 있어요. 그래서 if I could just introduce you real quick, Lucy, have you come up and then introduce yourself and kind of give your, you can say whatever you want to say.
Boundaries though. Tell them about your boundaries.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having us. My name is Lucy Bermudez, and like he asked, there's 10 of us in the office, 6.2 square miles. We have to divide them into different sections, so we're accountable for certain areas. My area covers anywhere from Western to Normandy, San Marino to 5th Street. So I'm smack in the middle of the division. I like to say I'm the heart of the division because I have a lot going on. I have the Koreatown Plaza, I have the Wilton Theater, I have 2 metro stations. So there's a lot of going on. So it's important for you individually, regardless of where you live in the division, to know exactly who your senior lead is. Because yes, you're going to be calling 911 for emergencies. Yes, you're going to be calling 1877 Ask LAPD for non-emergencies. But the aftermath, we are kind of like the middlemen between the community and the station. So if you have anything that's pressing, quality of life issues, anything that you think that officers responding on a radio call do not have the time to give you that extra, you call us because that's our job, to make sure that your voice gets heard. So I could go to my captain and tell him, sir, we need resources here because this is what's going on. So if you don't know who your senior lead is, please ask us. We'll go ahead and guide you and get that information. So thank you.
Senior Lead Officer Christopher Landry. I've been working the Koreatown area for 25 years now, and I brag to my family and friends that I work Koreatown.
Could you tell me what's your area?
Oh, my boundaries?
Yeah, please.
Sure, I'm sorry. My boundaries are 5th Street to the south, Melrose to the north, and then Western to the west, and Normandy to the east.
So it's just north of Lucy's area.
Yeah.
Hello, how's it going, everybody?
Hello.
My name's Senior Lead Officer Daniel Chavez, and I've been at Olympic Division since it opened. Olympic Division is a division that I wanted to come to. I was working Hollywood before that, and when I found out that Koreatown was getting their own police station, and it was going to be a beautiful station, I wanted to be a part of that. So I was very fortunate to be, I don't want to say recruited, but I was asked to come over by Deputy Chief Matt Blake at the time, who came and opened the division, and I'm very, very fortunate to be able to do that. My boundaries are actually the 10 freeway to the south, Pico to the north, Normandy to the east, and Arlington Crenshaw to the west. Olympic is a great place. I don't plan on going anywhere, and I really love working in Koreatown, so thank you.
Hello, my name is Albert Vasquez. I've been here at Olympic since 2014, so I really love it here. I have family that lives here and works here in Koreatown, and it's a great place to be. My boundaries are from Pico to 8th and San Marino area, from Hoover to Normandy. I'll be in that area till I retire, and there's many, many years to come, so I'll be here. Thank you.
우리 한인타운을 관할하는 모든 senior lead officer 분들이 오늘 나오셨어요. I don't remember the last time all 4 senior lead officers that have a piece of Koreatown were all here. So 여기 박수 한 번만 더 부탁드려요. Thank you all for coming back. 네, 이제 제일 중요한 시간인데 여러분들이 우리 그 시검사, 카운티 검사 또는 LAPD에 질문을 하실 수 있는 Q&A 이제 세그멘트인데요. 먼저 주민분들 질문 있으시면은 질문 손을 들어주고 해주시면 되겠습니다. For those of you our community members, youth included, if you have any questions for City Attorney Robert Cha, John Chang, Captain Ponce, Irene, anybody, please raise your hand and we can ask some questions. You can ask it in English, Korean, whatever you like.
잘못들인지 모르지만 중범은 D에서 관리하고 경범은 C에서 관리합니다. 그 말이 맞습니까?
중범, 그러니까 misdemeanor는 C에서 관리하고 felony는 DA에서. 근데 조금 아까 DA에서 felony and misdemeanor, you guys look at both of them. City는 misdemeanor만, 맞죠? 네.
세컨드 질문은 racial crime의 definition이 뭐예요? 예를 들어서 코리안이다, 뭐 주이시다, 그 픽업해가지고 해를 준다든지 그 boundary line.
John, can you just explain really quick what determines what's racial, like a hate crime?
Okay, so I think Robert Cha kind of explained a little bit about it. There's actually a statute. I actually had it in my slide, but my PowerPoint was getting so big, I pulled it out. But it's legally defined, and Mr. Cha actually kind of explained if there's intent, criminal intent, and there's the idea that you want to hurt somebody, and the motivation is race, some type of hate, discrimination, gender, then that is something that we'll look at. Now, the sentencing is different. For felonies, I have a case where there's a special circumstance alleged that the crime was motivated by hate. That can result in life without the possibility of parole. And other felonies, it can add an additional year, 2 or 3 years to whatever punishment there is. I don't have the statute in front of me, but yeah.
Yep.
One of the really important facts of hate crimes is in the city of Los Angeles, the Los Angeles Police Department has made a commitment to our citizens, and this is where the reporting of hate crimes is so important, that we take a report for what's called a hate incident. And that's, for example, if somebody were to walk up to you and verbalize, not commit one of these underlying crimes, but verbalize whether for you to go back to your home. What we hear a lot is to go back to that person, what they perceive your home country to be. So that would be a hate incident, right? Hey, you fill in the nasty name, the nasty, go back to South Korea, go back to Korea, go back to Mexico, go back to Peru, right? That, when they use those, that is a hate incident. Now, when they say that and punch you in the face, they've now committed a crime, which is a hate crime. Why are hate incidents so important? for our communities to report to us. The reason is because we can then, through the hate incidents, create a paper trail, if you will. So if that person discriminates against you, sir, says something, and tomorrow it's you, and the next week it's Irene, and then he hits Richard in the face, and we know that individual, we can bundle all of that together and then give it to the city attorney or district attorney for filing, which strengthens the overall because it shows a pattern of hate, of discrimination, right? And that strengthens us. So a lot of people think, well, I'm not going to tell the police. We are, as a police department, we're encouraging our community to come forward and report those type of incidents, as well as the criminal act that may have the hate crime overtone to it, and we will document that. And we know that it's far underreported, just from what we hear and when we have these type of community meetings. So the chief of police has made a commitment to our community to take hate incidents. We're one of only, I believe, 13 agencies in this entire region, Southern California region, that take a hate incident. Most law enforcement agents just take the hate crime and they'll indicate that nexus to the hate. But we will take a hate incident and treat it as if it were a crime. Not that it gets filed, but we keep it on file and we use it, or the district attorney and city attorneys use it for further prosecution and or intervention.
대답이 되셨나요?
제가 위트니스가 없었단 말이에요.
네.
저 사람이 나를 공격을 했는데 뭐 한국으로 가든 중국으로 가든 이렇게 했는데 위트니스가 없어요. 그럼 나는 반대 내가 당했을 때는 헤이트 크라임인데 그걸 어떻게 풀고 왔어요?
So, I don't know if you got that, John, but the suspect fled the country after what he perceives was a hate crime was committed upon him, but there are no witnesses. What can I do in that situation? Yeah, sure.
Or I don't know. You're just right there. So that's the hard part of our job. I would say always make that report. Captain has mentioned it, Mr. Cha has mentioned it. That incident report may be a report today, but a week from now, a month from now, that can be really strong evidence that we use to prove our case. Obviously nowadays we have CCTV or cameras everywhere. It's hard to revisit the area where you were attacked, but sometimes going back and walking the area, looking for cameras and asking the businesses to preserve those video surveillance footage, that's very helpful. A, make a report. B, hopefully an officer or detective will do the crime scene visit and follow up and then check for surveillance videos. Even in my cases, when I go to trial or I get assigned a case, I walk the crime scene because I want to look, are the cameras available? Is there video surveillance? I know it's not easy when it's just you and the assailant, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't report it. Please report it. Leave the investigation and the follow-up to us. We're professionals, and this is all we know how to do. And so we will do our best to investigate further.
Okay, thanks, John. We have one more question from the community.
네, 먼저 이렇게
나오고 있습니다. 말씀하세요.
좋은 자리를 마련해 주셔서 감사드립니다. 얼마 전에 제 친구가 어떤 마켓 주차장에서 물건을 사가지고 나오다가 실는데 블랙 아프리칸 그러니까 인상도 좋은 사람이 따라와서 수박을 이제 차에 카트에서 내려서 차에다 싣는데 제가 도움이 필요하냐 그래서 아니라고 했대요. 근데 그 흑인이 수박을 뺏어서 집어 던지면서 가방을 뺏어갖고 도망갔대요. 근데 이제 거기가 그 올림픽 경찰서하고 가까운 거리기 때문에 이제 폴리스는 금방 왔대요. 근데 주위 사람들은 그 범인이 바로 차를 가지고 와서 이제 수박을 깨트리고 가방을 뺏어서 도망갔는데 그때까지는 사람들도 정신이 없으니까 막 우왕좌왕했고 폴리스가 다행히 빨리 왔는데 이제 그 사람이 어떠냐 그래서 거기 돈이 들었다고 그러고 얘기를 했더니 걱정하지 말라고 돈만 쓰고 가방이랑 크레딧 카드 같은 거는 뭐 돌아올 수도 있다. 근데 그 차에는 전화기가 있었는데 이 남편이랑 이제 뭐 아들이 있었는데 그 위치 추적기가 있어서 그 남편 전화기에 보면은 그 범인이 이동하는 게 보였대요. 근데 폴리스가 쫓아가지를 않았대요. 근데 저는 그것이 커먼한 건지 그것이 질문입니다.
오케이. 통역하시는 분.
Thank you for making this great seminar and information. This happened to one of my friends not long ago in a parking lot of a market. She was loading her car with the groceries, and this nice-looking black African American gentleman came in, asked, "Do you need help?" And she said no. But then she took, as she was turning the watermelon off the cart, the person came and took the watermelon and broke the watermelon and let off with their purse. And then she called the police, and police soon came after from the Olympic station. And then there were witnesses who saw that this guy came over and took over and broke the watermelon and took off with the purse. But then she lost money and she made a police report, and then she was told that there are cases that you might get your purse back after they spend all the money. But then inside the purse there was a phone or some kind of app that tracks the location. So the husband could actually see this perpetrator where he was heading with the purse and the credit card. So, but then at that moment, police wasn't taking any action to chase after this person. Is this common, or what can we do?
Well, man, first, I'm sorry that happened to you, and I think probably a sense of frustration. What I would expect our officers to do is to either ask for more resources, so we could do that follow-up, because that is something, one of our values or one of our objectives is what we call, and especially in the detective side, is a relentless follow-up. And that means relentless follow-up right then if we have. And we have been successful when people have tracking devices or their phone is in that mode to be able to at least track that down. And we should be working to do that. So I don't know this particular case. For all of the citizens, if you feel that you're not getting the service that you want or you have that question, ask for a supervisor. And you can ask a sergeant, the rank of sergeant, which is above the officer rank, will come out and you can ask him or her that very question. Again, I would go back to, I know that is maybe culturally, what I've learned culturally, that might take a lot of courage, because you're questioning the police officers maybe, you're questioning their investigative ability or what they're going to do next, and then you're asking for their supervisor, and you're really putting that supervisor on the spot. But all of you have a right, if you're not happy with the what's going on there, or you have questions and the officers aren't able to clarify those, you have a right to ask for a supervisor and work with that supervisor to get some resolution, or at least to understand why that follow-up wasn't being done right then, or why that may or may not be. So I would ask for all of us in the future, if you have that type of situation, if the officers aren't able to explain to your satisfaction, or you don't understand, please ask for a supervisor, and they will do their very best to try to resolve that conflict so we have an understanding, so we aren't in this situation.
Thank you. 네, 방금 그 캡틴 펀스가 되게 중요한 말씀하셨는데, 여러분들이 이제 911을 불러가지고 무슨 emergency가 있어서 경찰이 왔잖아요. 근데 조사를 하는데 별로 좀 뭐 내가 암만 영어를 못 알아들어도 이 사람들은 지금 제대로 안 하는 것 같다. 그러면 여러분들은 시민으로서 슈퍼바이저를 요청할 수 있는 권리가 꼭 있으세요. 그래서 만약에 좀 봤는데, 뭐 물론 퍼트롤 하시는 분들은 솔직히 안 좋아할 수도 있어요. 우리끼리 얘기지만. 근데 충분히 슈퍼바이저나 서전트를 이제 신청할 수 있는 권리가 있으시기 때문에 911 부르신 후에 만약에 좀 기분에 이 사람은 좀 이렇게 이거를 심각성을 안 느끼는 것 같다 그러면은 충분히 sergeant나 supervisor를 부를 수 있는 권리가 있고. Captain, real quick, can I ask you about the if somebody calls and you know, let's say it's Koreatown and a Korean American person who's not comfortable with the language calls the police, they show up, but a non-Korean speaking person shows up. What are their rights as far as asking for a Korean speaking officer?
Yeah, so we are very fortunate here. We have a number of officers who speak Korean fluently. We have a number of detectives that speak Korean, speak fluently. But we also work with the language bank. Now, as it pertains to a citizen showing up, if they can translate for us, we use that, whether that be a family member or maybe a witness. We do have to be careful, and we need to ensure that we get that person's, try to garner that individual's trust, because that will be key for either the district attorney or the city attorney if that translation, as the officers wrote it down, was accurate. So there is some nuance to translation, but we can use any of you, could be, if you speak Korean, could definitely be a translator for us, a witness, a family member, another adult that's just willing to do that, and definitely the officers. I wanted to say one thing, ma'am, about it would surprise me a little bit, maybe there was a misunderstanding, because one thing our officers, I would say, love, and I will put the love on this, is if somebody committed a crime against you, especially a violent crime, there's nothing more than police officers like to do than to find that person and bring them into the criminal justice system for our district attorneys and our city attorneys, and to give you some, I guess, some faith that we're working for you. So I don't doubt that happened. I don't know the circumstances, but our officers, by and large, without a doubt, love to find the bad guys on your behalf. That's some of us, I would say maybe that's the reason we joined, and that's how we view keeping the community safe. That idea of that relentless follow. So we will use community members for translation, family members, and those officers will interface with either detectives or officers, and I think 7 days a week we have somebody at the station that speaks Korean, and we use them, and that's an important aspect. That's been asked of the Chief of Police, when are we going to have more Korean officers in Koreatown? They're right here sitting in front of us. And we have our cadet program that you can get involved with if it interests you.
Thanks, Cap. 오케이. 여러분들이 질문이 상당히 많으실 텐데 지금 생각이 안 나실 수가 있고, 지금 시간상 저희가 이제 언론 분들한테 이제 좀 질문을 할 수 있는 기회를 드리겠는데, 네. 네. John, sorry, can you assist? Appreciate it.
일어서서 해야 됩니까?
네.
노인회장입니다. 젊은 학생들을 만났기 때문에 노인회장으로서 시니어들을 대표해서 말씀드리겠습니다. 우선 검사님들, 이렇게 많은 분들이 한국 분들이 그 검사로 활동하신 걸 처음 알았습니다. 이렇게 와서 이렇게 한 거 처음 들었어요. 그래서 검사는 우리가 노인들이 사고가 났을 때 어느 정도의 사건을 검사한테 직접 신고해야 되는지, 일반 예를 들어서 핸드폰을 잃어버렸다, 경찰한테 신고하지 검사한테 신고 안 하는 거 아니지 않습니까? 그럼 검사의 그 신고 범위하고 경찰에게 직접 하는 거다, 이것이 그 한계가 그냥 궁금하다. 두 번째, 경찰한테는요, 우리가 매번 느끼지만 우리 시니어들은 이민호지가 얼마 안 돼가지고 영어를 못해요. 근데 신고를 하게 되면 911에 신고하고 또 한인에 신고하고 그러는데, 이런 데는 통역이 되지만 이 올림픽 경찰서 신고는 한국 사람을 바꿔달라면 시간이 걸리더라고요. 그래서 직접적으로 안 돼요. 그래서 이 노인들은 신고를 기피합니다. 신고가 복잡하고 오더라도 왜 늦게 신고했냐. 예를 들어서 누구 싸웠다. 누가 때리고 갔다. 그럼 누구냐? 인당 자기는 어떠냐? 영어를 어떻게 합니까? 못해요. 노인들은. 그래서 이런 것을 위해서 통역을 소셜 같이 통역을 상부 통역을 두시든지 아니면은 거기에 대한 대책이 강구가 되든지 그렇지 않으면 또 신고는 한국 사람들에게 신고할 수 있는 그 네트워크. 예를 들어서 전화번호를 주어가지고 한일에서도요. 그런 전화번호를 피해자들이 아까 경찰들 소개했습니다. 그 전화번호 몰라요. 걔들 어떻게 알아요? 우리들 알고 있으면 91밖에 몰라요. 우리 경찰서의 전화번호도 모릅니다. 이런 것을 일괄적으로 적어가지고 항상 휴대할 수 있도록 이렇게 노인들한테 해주셨으면은 노인회장으로서 전체의 의견이니까 반영을 해주시길 바라고 답변해 주시기 바랍니다.
네, 감사합니다. That's a good question. 네, 좋은 질문이신데 방금 제가 이제 캡틴 펀스한테 물어본 질문이 그거였어요. 한국 분들은 이제 언어벽 때문에 이제 뭐 신고를 해도 뭐 예를 들어서 한국어를 못하는 라티노 폴리스 오피서가 오든지 뭐 흑인 폴리스 오피서가 오든지 우리가 뭐 신고할 수 있는 방법이 없잖아요. 그래서 방금 저 캡틴이 말씀하신 게 올림픽 경찰서 2층에 보시면 디텍티브가 있어요. 디텍티브가 한인분들이 꽤 많은 걸로 알고 있어요. 제가 개인적으로 아는 분들만 몇 분이 계시고 좀 아쉬운 거는 그런 게 하나 있어요. 지금 아시안에 대한 그러니까 증오범죄는 인터넷으로 우리가 보고를 할 수가 없어요. 그렇지 않아도 제가 몇 달 전에 이제 YMCA에서 Chief of Police 제일 높으신 분하고 대화를 하면서 그거를 요청을 했어요. 우리 같이 이제 이민 사회에 계신 분들은 영어가 불편하시니까 이런 거를 당하면 한인에 오셔가지고 한인의 직원들이 이제 폴리스 리포트를 도와드리고 싶은데 온라인으로 이게 안 되니까 상당히 힘들다. 근데 그분이 뭐라고 그러셨냐면 hate crime, 아시안 직업범죄는 너무 LAPD한테 중요한 일이기 때문에 특별히 경찰이 와서 폴리스 리포트를 직접 받아야지만 우리는 그만큼 이제 니네 커뮤니티를 리스펙트를 하는 거다. 근데 저는 거꾸로 그렇게 얘기를 했죠. 경찰을 불러도 안 오는데 그리고 이거 언어 때문에 문제가 있는데 좀 제발 좀 그 인터넷으로 헤이 크라임을 신청할 수 있게 그러니까 신고를 할 수 있게끔 부탁을 했다고 했더니 뭐 자기는 뭐 알아본다고 하긴 했는데 뭐 진짜로 제대로 알아볼 건지 그것까지는 모르겠어요. 근데 지금 올림픽 경찰 you said there was a translation bank or some language bank?
We have a language bank. But as I sit here and think about your question, then maybe the CA's office, the DA's office, any community groups, maybe we should, unique to Koreatown, maybe we should work together and apply for a grant that would hire an individual or a language that would actually be stationed 24 hours a day at Olympic Division, and we could all work together and figure out where we could find that money for an individual to be not a police officer. Of course, they'd have to be vetted and cleared through police, but that would be available 24 hours a day at Olympic Division and be stationed at Olympic Division. We have the space for it. Again, that's a kind of community partnership collaboration, and I just kind of think of this as I listen to these questions, because I've heard this concern more than once over my year about this kind of, as we strive to build trust with our community, not that, and we have great support from our Korean community here, and love our officers, but that we do have that language barrier, and that's a cause of frustration for the Korean community. I've heard this more than once. So maybe I look for some ideas of maybe there's some grant, KAFLA can help us, and maybe I think that would be a viable solution. Officers are free to work wherever they want in the city. We are lucky that many of our Korean officers that speak Korean want to come back and serve this community. So we do have that, but that doesn't mean they're always available to do that translation when we need them available. And that's what made me think of maybe a more permanent position and solution, because the officers are free to work wherever they wish in the city.
Thanks, Sam. That's what the OBA is here for, right?
Yeah.
To do stuff like that. All right. So we'll make them spend some of their money. Okay. Let's see. 그 Senior Lead Officer 이메일은 제가 여러분한테 원하시면 저희가 I can give out disclose emails, right? Is that too much? That's okay, right? Your addresses and your social security numbers as well, please. Okay. Huh? Just Harry's? Okay. 여러분 그 이메일 원하시면 제가 끝나고 저희가 드리겠습니다. 저한테 말씀을 해주세요. 오케이. 언론에서 질문이 있으시면은 if anybody from the media has any questions they'd like to ask anybody up here, your opportunity is now. Paul, you have a question?
Yeah, I'm from NBC.
Okay.
Can I ask to John Chang, LA County?
Sorry, John, you're on the spot again. Come on up. You're a crowd favorite today.
First of all, thank you so much for this speech today. You mentioned about the case filing takes sometimes long time, right? And if hate crime case filing takes long time, then while case is processing, what will LA County do for victims? Like, and if case determined not a hate crime, then still you guys gonna give a mental health program, or because for hate crime victims it's really hard to wait a resource.
Right. Very good question. Thank you. So, investigations do take time. That isn't to say that our office, we have victim advocates. We work with some of the best people who are truly there to service others. And even though the case may take a while, or it may take a while to go to trial, it doesn't mean that our office doesn't offer victim support. We have a dedicated staff who do nothing but help victims. And they do help with counseling. They do help with receiving therapy. They also help sometimes with relocation. There are so many different avenues that a victim advocate can help. And I think Mr. Cha is going to talk about some of the resources that are also available.
So the California State Compensation Board has victim advocates at the stations that work for the DA's office and for the city attorney's office. So this is another reason why it's really important to make that report, because the victim can get restitution, mental health counseling, regardless of whether we file the case or not. So independent of there being enough evidence to prosecute, they can get services from California State, but they got to go to the station and make that report.
Question for John.
Just stay up there.
General complaint I get from like regular trade organizations, especially like seniors, are when they file complaints, it's like they just prosecute it as like a regular crime, like if it is a battery case, a robbery case, you know, they just go file it as a battery or robbery case, not as you know, hate motivated, you know, crime many of the times, and you know, many of the times cases being dropped by DA's office, and there were incidents when Nigerian citizen was walking the street and got assaulted by this one person, you know, assumed homeless person, and then he got attacked, and then you know he got treatment, and then he was walking on that street again, and he saw the same guy just you know walking on the street, you know, be as free as he can, you know. What is some of the things that your answer for these kind of situations?
Do you want to answer first?
Cases being dropped.
So that's a very complex, difficult question. So I'm going to let John answer that. So there's a number of things that were in that. It's like a law school fact pattern.
Yeah.
So first off, how it's filed, again, if we're filing the hate crime, or in your example, elder abuse would probably be the more appropriate crime, which is easier to prove. Hate crime is a very specific crime that requires us to show not only did he hit the person, but that the reason he hit the person was because they're of a different race, because they're Asian. That's very difficult to prove. If he says, I hate Koreans, and then hits, of course, that's easy. But if it's just, we feel, well, of course he attacked the person because he's Korean. We have to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt. But even if we don't file the hate crime, we could still file that battery, okay? As far as punishment, the punishment is ultimately up to the judge. California law allows the judge to grant what's called diversion on most misdemeanors. So that's out of our control, but unfortunately some judges feel, well, this person's mentally ill or this person is a drug addict. They had mitigating reasons why they committed their crime. They weren't in the right mind. And sometimes that case is dismissed early. Usually there's at least a criminal protective order for at least 1 to 2 years. But the reality is after that, if that judge, and we fight it, we object, but if that judge feels, well, this is the punishment or the dismissal I'm going to give, there's not a lot we can do there. You want to add anything?
If I could just add, number one, report the crime, but above all else, it has to be done accurately. That's why the support person, for example, I'm the support person for my mom. Someone who can help explain the situation. Two, if there's an interpreter that can assist, because those types of statements are often lost, especially when a report's being taken. And we want to preserve it, we want to save it. And the language barrier is an issue, but if you have someone who is bilingual or someone who can be an interpreter, that can be of great aid. Number two, what gives me hope, and then I'm hoping that things will change, because of course we care about people who are in our community. Seeing so many of you here today gives me hope. Knowing that there's organizations like KAFLA, that there are community groups, and we have senior lead officers. Hopefully what we can do is not just have this one meeting and be done, but build off of this and build our relationships and share our contact information so that we can bridge the gap, so that this language barrier doesn't cause an issue. Mr. Chao has been working as a prosecutor for 27 years. He's dedicated his life to this. I've worked for 15 years. I love what I do, and I wish I could help more and more people. But the only way we can do that is if we know about it. The only way we know about it is if you report the crime. And hopefully, just like the captain said, we can have a dedicated Korean-speaking interpreter working at Olympic Station at some point.
Thank you. Any other questions from the media? Paul, did you have a follow-up?
No, thank you.
Okay. Okay, we are surprisingly right on schedule. 저희가 시간을 딱 맞춰서 여러분들이 만약에 그 LAPD나 뭐 여기 검사님들한테 혹시 따로 추가로 질문하실 게 있으시면 저희가 연락처를 드릴게요. 경찰 여기 시니어 리더 오피서 분들은 핸드폰까지 있는 명함을 저한테 다 주셨기 때문에 원하시면 요 앞에 오셔가지고 명함은 모자라니까 사진을 찍어 갖고 가시면 여러분이 한인타운에 사시는 그 시니어 리더 오피서 내 구역의 담당자를 직접 이메일로 보내든지 아니면 핸드폰 번호도 있으니까 핸드폰으로 전화하셔가지고 뭐 내 개인적인 뭐 무슨 상황이 지금 있는데 뭐 저 팔로우업이 필요하다 그러면 따로 물어보셔도 되고 언제든지 물론 한인회로 이제 오셔가지고 저희가 대신 이제 뭐 영어가 불편하시면 저희가 대신 통역을 해드릴 수가 있습니다. 오늘 나오신 그 우리 아이린리 검사님, 우리 시 카운티 검사님들, 시니어 리더 오피서 분들은 물론 이제 돈 받고 여기 나오시는 분들이지만 이 앞에 계신 분들은 다 봉사로 오늘 나오신 거예요. 그래서 우리 오늘 프레젠테이션 해주신 분들을 위해서 다시 한번 박수 한번 부탁드리겠습니다. 좀 도움이 되셨나요? 저는 이런 강의를 많이 들어봤는데 뭐 제 그 행사라서 그런 건지 상당히 좀 많은 걸 배운 것 같은데 여러분들은 어떻게 느끼실지 모르겠습니다.